I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mrs. Acosta, would you lead us in a flag salute?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mission statement, the Oradell Public School District is dedicated, Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Record and Town News and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darian, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta. Mrs. Nigam is not here. Mrs. Downey. Here. Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mrs. Norian.
Here.
Mrs. Walker is not here. Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Darian.
Here.
Mrs. Nichols.
Here, open to the public for agenda items only. Not seeing any, we'll move forward to my report. We have a special guest this evening, so I would ask him to come forward, introduce himself, and tell us whatever he wants to tell us.
Oh, wait, the button. Is it green?
Green means on? There we go, okay. I appreciate the time. My name is James Albro. I'm the superintendent of schools at Riverdale. I have the pleasure of replacing the irreplaceable Patrick Fletcher. I want to take a moment just to come out tonight and introduce myself to you. I know we'll be working together in a variety of different ways. I'm already working with your superintendent here when she answers my emails, which is not all the time. So I want to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm also here on behalf of the Riverdale Board of Education. You may have seen the banners going up around our school properties that we are going out for a referendum in December. I'm here to just tell you that we are going out to referendum in December. We are also having, on October 2nd, at one of our meetings, we're having a public hearing to talk about the referendum and to invite anyone from the public. Certainly, the Boards of Education of Oradell and of River Edge are invited to come and ask questions and learn about it. On our website, you'll find a section called Referendum. All the information that you will see if you're in person on October 2nd, you will also find on our website. Hopefully would answer any questions that you would have. But I invite you all to come out on October 2nd to ask questions and hear from me and hear from the architect about the projects that we propose and the facilities renovations that we think are very important for the future of our district and for the children of Oradell and of River Edge. That's all I had to say. It's really nice to meet you, and thank you for the work you do. And by the way, this is a magnificent room. I'm very impressed with it.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Always welcome here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good luck at Riverdale.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, still waiting or asking for any topics or questions for our culture and climate and culture survey that we'll be sending out. So if you can get those in. I talked to Ms. Bozios, said maybe that she could meet with PR first, put together, a tentative survey, send it out, and then we could also add to it at that point, but I think maybe we need to start on it. And then also any committee ideas we had brought out. So if anyone has any comments on that. And that is all I have, so moving to superintendent's report.
I'm going to move from my normal position today to the podium with Mrs. Brancato just because it allows me to point at some of the data that she and I will be sharing today.
Except for the Trispas. Is it Trispas? No, the other guy.
First of all, I'd like to go on record that Mrs. Danahy also ignored Mr. Albro's email on the first day of school. We're both a little busy. It's going to become the standard joke, I think. Mrs. Brancato and I are here today to share the NJSLA results from our spring administration. They were administered in the spring, and we're going to take you through what we did administer. So we facilitate the NJSLA in language arts and mathematics in grades 3 through 6, the science assessment in grade 5, the access for English language learners, which I shared the data on August 16th, and dynamic learning maps. Dynamic learning maps are assessments used with students who are more significantly impaired special education students who will not meet the expectations of the NJSLA. We do not have 10 students that take that assessment. We actually have 0 students at Oradell Public School. The students that we have that take that assessment are out-of-district placements, but because we don't have 10, we can't share any of that data. But we have received that, and we'll be sharing that both with their out-of-district placements and also with their parents. So this is an overview of the NJSLA and the amount of time that it takes to administer. And this is the scoring guide, which has not changed since the assessment was the Park assessment. So we know that level 4 and 5 in language arts and mathematics means that you're meeting and exceeding grade level expectations. Level 1 and level 2 are you're not meeting or partially meeting, and level 3 is that bubble area, which I've never really liked very much because I'd prefer if we just label them as we're meeting expectations or we're not. But that is the group that we often are talking about, those students who are approaching grade level expectations that are right on the cusp of passing. Then when the state started administering the science assessment, they actually changed the scoring guide for that specific assessment. So in there, level 1 and level 2 is below and near proficiency, level 3 and level 4 are meeting proficiency and advanced proficiency. We are required, and just so you know, this year's presentation every year's presentation is important. This one is very important for us. It is the one that the county will look at for our CUSAC points. So this is always a mandated slide. It's not something we spend a lot of time on, but you will notice that the majority of our students do sit for the NJSLA.
What does the CUSAC points cover?
What's in the presentation. So for example, it has to be presented within 60 days of when we've received. So we received our testing results on September 12th. So we meet that. It needs to include total data, subgroup data, trend data, and have both next steps, interventions, celebrations, and they actually like when you throw a couple photos in to make it personable. It's actually on the list.
You get points for celebrations?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure.
So this is what we've done already. So as a board, you have a little more knowledge about this than the public because you know we begin to receive testing data in June. And the first set of data we receive is just individual student data. But it allows us to begin to look at students that we might want to put interventions in place for, or students we might be concerned about, students we might not have included in our summer program that all of a sudden we're like, let's get them here. Okay, as the summer goes on, we start to get more and more data. The next set of data will include the state data. How did the state do? Now you have, how did your school do? How did the state do? The next set of data that just came in recently gives us evidence statements. So it shows us the specific standards, how the state did on a specific standard, and also how our district did on a specific standard. It also, at that time, you can see, everyone thinks that everyone in the state takes the same test. They actually don't. There's 2 different forms, typically, of the state assessment. So you can also see who took Form 220, who took Form 120, and did those have different standards? Because sometimes they might not have assessed something, so we don't want to assume mastery of it. We then also look at NJSLA compared to our district assessment student data, and that's why we use Linkit, because everything is in Linkit. So as I've shared with you, Linkit provides us with fingertip files. So if you're a 4th grader and your 4th grade teacher gets your fingertip file, it will have your 3rd grade NJSLA scores on there. It will have Linkit A, B, and C from 3rd grade on there. It will have your Dibbles assessment, your writing score, on there. So the teacher can kind of see an overview of you. Now they can access all of that data from past years within the digital platform, but sometimes having that on one sheet of paper makes everyone's life a little bit easier. As I stated, I may not have shared that. Today the results went home to parents, so they should receive them by the end of the week. We've uploaded our NJSLA data to link it, and we really looked at this data because I will speak about later in my report, not just the Title I grants we've put in, which we looked at this data for, but also, if you've seen anything in the media, the high impact tutoring grant, which we looked at this data to help us write that grant, which was submitted today. I realized when Amy and Ms. Brancato and I were talking about our presentation, we always do the same thing. We always do it language arts, math, science. So we're flipping things around this year. We're going to start with science. So as I stated, science is administered to our 5th graders, which means that our 5th graders do take 7 days of testing. It's a long period of time. This slide shows you how many of our students scored at each proficiency level, and it also shows you where the state scored at each proficiency level. So what I've tried to do, and this is actually the state's form for presentation. So what I've tried to do is also shade each level one way. And the district is usually red, but I can see that you can't necessarily see that as well. So you'll see that our combined passing rate was a 60%. The state's combined passing rate was a 26.8% in the 5th grade science assessment. Students will not be assessed again in science until 8th grade. This slide will show you the comparison of all of our students with IEP, and our current and former ELLs. I've chosen to group that data together because if I just did current ELLs, I couldn't share the data. But if I group current and former ELLs together, I will have more than 10 students, so I can publicly share that data. Plus, I do think it's really important that we keep an eye on our former English language learners or multilingual learners, because sometimes the content area later on, just because they've tested out of the program doesn't mean they still need some support in those content areas. And this is our subgroup analysis. As Mr. Darian asked before, this is one of the mandated slides. Now, we're a very big school, but a very small district, so we don't get to share as much as some other people because, for example, Hispanic or Latino students, we don't have 10 in 5th grade, so I can't publicly share that data. We didn't have 10 of 2 or more races, so I can't publicly share that data. And interestingly, the state does not mandate that you present by gender, but it's something I've always been very interested in. So I have chosen to include the gender breakdown for each of the tests as well. I'm actually happy to see that it's not as disparate as it has been in some other years. And you will actually see more disproportionality in, say, mathematics. We often talk as a district that the state's not a really good comparison for us. We expect ourselves to do better than the state's average. But one of the things that I've learned over time is if we look at the difference between our performance with the state almost becomes the control group for us. And we can start to gauge how we're doing. So you notice a pretty similar performance. If we went down, the state went down. And I know that the biggest frustration for you as a board is, we always talk about the one thing we really want to know is, how are we doing compared to our peers? And we call our peers the Bergen County I group, distribution group, right? The DFG group. Those districts include the flow districts, Franklin Lakes, Oakland, and Wyckoff, Tenafly, Allendale, Alpine, all the Northern Valley districts, and that's who we want to know. How are our students doing compared to students who have similar educational experiences, similar affluency, similar privilege? Now, we always get frustrated because that data doesn't come out until December. However, what I've tried to do this year is start to kind of make some predictions. So what I've done is I've taken the year of 2019, which is the year that we administered the NJSLA pre-COVID, 2022, and 2023. And one of the things that you'll often notice is the district, our Bergen County cohort, those 21 districts that are of similar affluence and similar populations, they often mirror the state's line. They're just higher. So if a test was difficult for the state, it's going to be a little more difficult for the county. So you'll notice when 2019, the tests were now post-COVID, the state goes down to 25, the county goes down a little bit as well. So the shape of that data mirrors. Last year, the shape of our data went up. So it'll be interesting. My gut is that we'll still be a little bit above the county average. We may not be as above as we were last year. So as I stated, and I think it's very healthy for our district to have some celebrations, because we are a district that is very focused on what can we do better, how do we improve. So some of our celebrations are that our science is incredibly consistent. Our performance in science post-pandemic, pre-pandemic are almost exactly the same. One of the things I was excited to see, as I shared, Amy and I have access to the evidence statements, which also talk about these areas over here. These are the 6 areas that are assessed. And I met with Mrs. Cataldo today, our STEAM teacher, to go over the data, and she said, it doesn't surprise me that life science is our strength. Think about how much work we do with gardening and with animals. And she's right. Our curriculum is actually, you're studying animals in every year. Now, the one area that we noticed needed work was actually physical science. So knowing that, that's something we'll go back and look at our curriculum in. We actually show strengths in all 3 of the practice areas, which that's your design process. Are you making theories? Are you analyzing the data? Are you using that data to inform new theories? What I was happy to hear from her, she said, I actually believe that will get even stronger because when we wrote the new STEAM units this summer, we made sure that those 3 practices were in every single STEAM unit. And as I said, the physical science is something I think we just want to look at and say, is it a unit that's being shortchanged in some places? Is there some deliberate activities that we can build in? And if you think about it, I think about myself both as the assistant principal, the principal, and the superintendent. I talk about the garden all the time. I don't talk as much about physics. So that's something that we just want to think about as a school and a district. So I'm going to switch over to mathematics. As I said, I'm turning the whole presentation upside down this year. And again, you're going to see our performance in each of the 5 proficiency groups compared to the state. So I'm just going to give you some time, remembering that when you have gray, it's both level 1, that maroon on the left is the district, the next one is the state. So for example, in 4th grade, we had 0 students at below proficiency, and the state had 13.1. When we look at our combined levels, you will see a very similar performance in all 4 of the grades. As much as I think this is important information, one of the pieces I like actually more is when we look at the trend over time. So we'll start by looking at some of our subgroups. And I could not do multilingual learners by grade level because I don't have enough students. In the science assessment, they specifically break out current and former. In the language arts and math assessment, for whatever reason, they only give us current. And so we don't actually have 10 students at 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th grade. We have 10 when we combine them together. And this is our race and ethnicity data. Again, I can't report on certain categories as we don't have enough students to publicly report. And this is our proficiency by gender. This is a very telling slide to me, something we've been talking about a lot. It doesn't necessarily mirror what we see with gender in other subjects, especially when you look at 4th and 5th grade. Last year, we actually weren't allowed to do trend analysis because they believe you need 3 years for trends. So I privately did some before and after COVID, but I couldn't publicly share them anyway. This year, they said you could use the year before COVID as one of your trend years. So again, the piece I'm always looking at is the difference. So, in our 6th grade in 2019, they were 28 points above the state. This year, they're 38 points above the state. You will notice in the data, the biggest area of concern is our current 4th graders who were 3rd graders when they took the NJSLA, and that is why, Mrs. Brancato will share later, they are a focus in mathematics for the high impact tutoring grant. And again, I love to look at the shape of the data. So in December, I will add the Bergen County I cohort to 2023. But based on that, what I shared on the previous slide about the math performance in 3rd grade, you're going to see here too when you look at the data visually. So when we look at our scores in 4th grade compared to 3rd grade and how much higher 4th grade is, either 4th grade significantly outperformed, but the shape of the data says to me that this probably should have been around here. So when that comes in, we'll see if my predictions are accurate. One of the things I'm very happy to see when I look at this data is we've been concerned about our mathematical achievement for some time. And if you look at 2019, we were right on the Bergen County I average. And if you look at last year, we were right above it. But you can tell from this data, whether we're looking at 2019, whether we're looking at 2022, or whether we're looking at 2023, performance is going down. That 6th grade test is where most students are not doing as well. Our dip is a lot less. And again, I mean, you can see that here when you compare to the state, and we're 38 points above the state there. Yes.
So you said they're not doing as well, the 6th grade?
No, they are doing. Our 6th grade is doing, I think the 6th grade test overall, so when you look at, Mrs. Walker, this slide, the combined passing rate in the state for the 6th grade math test is 34%. Our passing rate is 72%. So that's a much harder test. So even though that 72 is lower than that 74, my guess is when we look at it compared to the county, we're actually going to be well placed. And again, it's design process. I'm making some theories looking at the data.
But I thought you said overall, not only our district, but all the districts, the 6th grade always scores lower.
Our district is not. Our district is actually, I think, showing some better progress in 6th grade than the state overall. And let me see if it's here. Give me one second. Okay, so Mrs. Walker, if you look at 2019, the state had 40% of its students passing, right? So pre-COVID, they had 40%. Now they've gone down. But what do you notice about Oradell Public School? We had 68 before COVID. Our scores have gone up. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't place for improvement, but when we share the celebrations, I'll share one other reason that I think that that's pretty impressive. Oh, it's 21. Is that you? Okay. But I will, before Amy's like, you're not going to let me talk anyway. Before Amy comes up to talk to you more about the interventions, the reason, last year we returned to the departmentalized model. Now, when we return to a departmentalized model in 6th grade, our math time decreases significantly. If we go from 80 minutes to, I'm going to say 55 minutes.
Wow.
Yet, we've done that, and our performance has equaled or improved. Now, some would say that's because we have a highly qualified middle school math teacher teaching everyone. Maybe. But it's kind of impressive to me because the instructional period has decreased. I will let you speak now.
Hi, everybody. So we are celebrating that we have consistent performance in math. There's no grade level that's underperforming significantly or outperforming the grades. We ran an ESSER-funded outside of the school day program last year, and when we looked at the students who participated, of the 33 students that were participating in that program, 22 of those showed improvement. The 4th through 6th showed improvement on the NJSLA, comparing last year's to this year's. And we looked at the Linkit Form C for the 3rd graders because we didn't have data for them for the year prior. So we're seeing that it's working. We're making tweaks to the program. We will run it again this year, but we're making some tweaks, based off of feedback from, families, from teachers, from the students overall. And we talked about the less minutes of instruction, but improvement in the 6th grade. So that's definitely a celebration. Okay, for our next steps. So there's a lot of things that we're thinking about surrounding math. We are participating in that Early Learning Networked Improvement Community, that ELNIC, which while it's early learning and the grades of K through 3, it really sets the foundation and provides professional development for our teachers to learn how children learn math and best practices to put into place. Setting that up from early on, we feel will really help us significantly overall as we grow in our math program and show the impacts in testing years when they get to the testing years. We are, as I said, running an outside of the school day program again, and we will we'll cap the number of students in the program at 6 students. We found that the smaller group obviously, performed better, more teacher and individualized, personalized attention based on the data for those students. We did submit today the application for the High Impact Tutoring Grant, which would focus on our incoming this year's 3rd grade and 4th grade students. We will devote double the amount of time for the 4th grade because we do have that data from the NJSLA. And the focus will be on fractions and the application of their knowledge of fractions in the word problems or mathematical situations. This year, were able to incorporate the WIN back into the 6th grade schedule. We were challenged a bit last year when it was departmentalized, but we found a way in the schedule to have that happen, so there will be time that students won't be missing new learning for any intervention that would need to be for both ELA and math. And that will allow us to focus on grade level skills, like the Tier 2 supports for students, as well as skills that maybe weren't mastered in prior years that would be our Tier 3 supports. We haven't fully done this yet because we just have the reports all in Linkit now, but we will provide opportunities for the teachers, both the intervention and the classroom teachers, to review and analyze those evidence statements that Megan was talking about from the prior year, so they can kind of see where the students are this year based on their performance from last year, and how we might need to make adjustments in all of our tiers. We may need to make adjustments in our Tier 1 instruction for all of our students based on those trends. And we will continue our professional development with an outside consultant with the structures and implementation of guided math workshop, which would really help us, again, personalize. When we're looking at the student data, we'll be able to personalize the work that they're doing in the classroom, both within the math period and in WIN. Next.
So we're going to end with language arts. And our language arts data is our biggest celebration. So this slide will show you our levels compared to the state. So you'll see our, again, we go to over here where you may want to focus your attention. This is the combined passing rate. So in third grade, which was our lowest performing group, we had 70.2% of our students pass, where with the other three grades, we are at or nearing 90% passing. And we have some thinking about that, which really has to do with how we're identifying students early on, because clearly when we're identifying and intervening, we're meeting those levels of proficiency. And again, we'll look at that data by program. And just as a reminder, this presentation will be placed on the website tomorrow, so you can always, or if anyone's watching, they can always go and look at it. And by race and ethnicity. I will say that one of the pieces that's a little bit of a challenge for a large school, small district is 65.7 on 12 students versus 65.7 on 100 students. One or two students can really sway data more if the population size is smaller. And our proficiency by gender. So this is part of what I was speaking about before. So you'll see almost a completely equal performance between females and males in fourth grade, but do you remember the trend on mathematics and how much our male students were outperforming? So that is something that we're actually very excited to dig into and look at. I mean, we definitely have some theories about what types of texts we're exposing children to, choice, how are we approaching it. And this is our language arts trend analysis for the past, our 3-year trend. So as a reminder, 2019 is our pre-COVID year, and 2023 is our most recent year. And again, you will see really high differences compared to the state, with the exception of that one third grade cohort, which is really our focus. The reason we did not write the high impact tutoring grant for language arts is because we've already dedicated other title funding for language arts that we did based on knowing some things before some NJSLA data came in. So that allowed us to truly focus the high impact tutoring grant on mathematics because we knew other interventions were already in place to target language arts. And when we look at the shape of the data again, see, I'm always fascinated because, again, this is so similar that state data in blue is so similar to the red data shape. And then when you see us kind of go up on that 6th grade, like a superintendent, that makes me incredibly proud, because if we want students to be high anywhere, we want to know that if they had something that wasn't working, we intervened and they're leaving Oradell Public School and going to see Jim Albro at Riverdale with the skill set they need to be successful.
Okay, so for celebrations for language arts, we have maintained strong achievement levels for our grades 4, 5, and 6. We did intervention for some of our students within the school day for ELA, and out of those students who were taking part in the test-taking strategies, with targeted intervention, 86% of those who participated in that program showed improvement. In grades 4 to 6, as I said with math, we used NJSLA data from last year and this year. And then for 3rd grade, we used Linkit Form B as a predictor, and then the NJSLA. The Oradell Public School class of 2025, which is our current 5th graders, we were very pleased with some of the things that we saw there. They increased from 73.6% passing as 3rd graders in 2022 to 90.6% passing as 4th graders in 2023. And they increased from 20% scoring level 5, which was exceeding expectations, as 3rd graders to 44.9% as 4th graders. So our next steps around language arts. Again, we're going to have the teachers reviewing the NJSLA data when planning for their WIN to target the skills for small groups and individualized instruction. We are making sure that we're providing opportunities for students to explore a variety of texts that are fiction and nonfiction reading materials and practice in responding and writing. We're working with our teachers in grades 4 to 6 to ensure that they have practice, the students have practice comparing, contrasting information from multiple sources, not just with all in one text, but across chapters and also different passages that they're reading and digesting.
And that's because on the evidence statements, that came out as a weakness. So anything that we've put here that's very specific to a standard is because the evidence statement said, this is something as a district that you could use some work on.
Yeah, we looked at where the state was and where we were maybe not as high. We're higher than the state, but not as high as we want to be, and that was one of the areas. In 6th grade, while we teach the reading, literature, and informational text standards, we also have something called companion standards, which are history standards that are integrated into our 6th, well, if we had 7th and 8th grade also, but 6th grade and up. And that's an area, especially using primary and secondary sources, so working with our teachers to incorporate more practice with that within the classroom. Providing professional development this year to all of our staff members, all of our certificated teachers, in helping to individualize learning more, so creating differentiated activity lists. This is an outside consultant that we used last year to help us with inquiry work. We're using them again. There's some modules that we have that the teachers are doing on their own to learn, and then we have a consultant coming in to sort of, it's almost like a flipped classroom, to then kind of enhance their learning and help to target so that we can move everyone along their continuum. So if a student is, performing below proficiency, we work to get them up to proficient, and proficient up to exceeding, and even to challenge our students who are already exceeding, so that everybody is working to their ability and moving on their own curve, I guess. We have a September boost this year where we're doing intervention. We actually started it on September 11th, which is earlier than we've started any intervention before over the past couple of years. We are running a Title I outside of the school day program for, as Megan had said, our 4th grade students with a focus on literary analysis. That will be starting in October. And foundational reading skills are being addressed in the Tier 3 supports within the WIN during the school day to ensure that all of our students have the tools necessary to access the grade level text so they can read the text and they are able to understand what they're reading. We're building time in for practice with reading response and teacher feedback in the intervention in grades 4 to 6 as well. So it's a lot, and we kind of tried to think, what are our big takeaways, our final takeaways? So we do need to, with regards to math, continue to look at screening tools for mathematics. We have a screening tool for our lower grades in ELA, our DIBELS, but we are looking to see something for math. And also incorporating benchmarks in addition to Linkit. So what other assessments can we use to be able to really identify specifically where our students are and what they need, what we need to provide for them so they continue to grow. We will continue to look at the gender imbalances, particularly in mathematics. And we thought it was important to note that we're always looking for improvement, right, in ways that we can improve, but we do need to focus and celebrate our students are performing well overall, and they're not really showing the academic decline because of the pandemic when we look overall at all of our data, which is something for us to celebrate. And as we, I think, mentioned last year too, testing, instead of it being just one more thing to do, we were trying to help it to use it to build community. And with that, so this year, we had our K-2 students create messages, positive messages, words of encouragement. They put it on chart paper. We delivered it to the upper grade testing classrooms, and they used it to, if they had taken down their anchor charts, to decorate their room so that it's a positive environment in the testing room, or to use as a cover for the anchor charts, because during testing, no anchor charts for the subject area can be displayed in the classroom. One of our students in first grade decided that she wanted to write a poem, and she asked if she could read it over the announcements in the morning. So that picture shows one of our students with Miss Hawley on the announcements reading her poem, which is in the middle picture there. And then for our teachers during testing, we really wanted testing to be seen in a positive light, right? It is a lot of days, particularly for fifth grade. So we
want to do well. And they put a lot of pressure on themselves to know that their students are meeting and exceeding expectations. So one of the things Amy is wonderful at, as is Michelle, is trying to create an environment where, like, you've got this. We've got you and you've got this. So our testing, the testing center where you pick up all your materials, which I'm not gonna lie, when I was principal, with a folding table and like some tests, go get your stuff and move on, is now like a celebration.
So we played music as the teachers, depending on the subject area, and on our last day of testing, let's see if I can get to this. Uh-oh. Why is it so sad? Wait,
Go.
all right.
Oh, it's not going.
Okay, so you didn't really know what that was. We'll try that, try that one more time. So I'm not sure if it's going to work. This is the last day of testing. We had bubbles for the teachers. They came in to get their testing materials. It was the last day of science. I think it may have been She Blinded Me with Science. I'm not sure if that's, Michelle, what we played or not, but we had science songs going. And because we were doing this all along, and fifth grade did have the additional 4 days of testing, the two fifth grade teachers came in. They were actually going to place a video or music also on the flip side. So it became... It lessened the stress and anxiety around testing. So I'll try it one more time.
I will send it
it's
to you.
not showing on the slide.
Yes, I'll send it to you in your board update.
Sorry, I didn't see it wasn't here.
It's okay.
I would exit full screen
Got it.
from the presentation and then try it.
Rami can see behind me.
It's possible that it's still on full screen,
That's okay.
like the presentation.
It's okay. I'm going to send it to him. That's fine. This is really important because we hear about testing from the state, and we don't want our kids to go in and go, it's NJSLA testing. So anything we can do to add a flavor of, this is your chance to shine, not something that you should dread, is positive. I am pretty sure that every teacher in grade 3 through 6 may have gained 5 pounds because we also just kept feeding them candy in the testing center. Okay, so this is your time, which you've all been writing feverishly. So do you have any comments, wonderings, or questions?
Yeah, open up to the board at this point. Anything?
I do have a wondering. This high-impact tutoring sounds awesome. I'm really excited to see that the grant is being applied for, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we get it and it all works out. I do have a question. How will that be integrated into the classroom, and will it affect other classroom time?
No, so when we have an intervention period right now, our tier 3 students, are kind of lowest of the low, if you will, are going out and getting intensive intervention. So we have focused our high impact tutoring grant on the level up, one from them, the kids that we might be missing. We actually are not using Oradell Public School staff for it, as the grant allowed you to use an external vendor, and they approved certain external vendors. An external vendor will be coming in during those WIN periods, working within the intervention room. And the grant has a lot of parameters on it. So that person that comes in can only work with between 1 to 3 students at a time. So I know a lot of parents think that everyone is getting high-impact tutoring. We have $38,000. We're not Clifton. You know, we don't have a huge amount. So $38,000, when you are having someone come in and you can only work with 3 students at a time, it's not as significant, but we feel that we can really target a population with it. And there is some rumor, just so you know, that we may get some more. So the $38,000 was decided based on disseminating the grant using whatever formula the state did. If some districts don't apply for it, other districts will be redistributed their overage.
Mr. Walsh?
Can you tell me how many students are in the grades?
Offhand, no. I would say, I can give you a range. I can say between 112 and 126, but
If you start from the 3rd grade, I'll believe you no matter what you say.
Mr. Walsh, I never lie. I can tell you specifically that
My math is going to be predicated on the number that you give me.
Sure, and I can provide that for you in an email. Like, I know specifically 5th grade was 103 students and 6th grade was 123 students.
Okay,
Was that right?
that only leaves us with 2 grades.
So, okay, 3rd grade, Mr. Hagopian? No, I want last year's 3rd grade, this year's, you need last year's 3rd grade because of incoming students. 119 in last year's 3rd grade.
Right. One more to go.
126 in last year's 4th grade. So our highest performing cohort had the largest class size. There goes all the studies.
Okay, so in looking at the, I don't know who comes up with these, but I think it's predicated, it's made up to mix me up.
Okay.
Because we start off with, state starts off with science, 1 grade, and the first numbers I look at 98.3, which is pretty good. I don't want to turn the pages anymore once I get to 98.3. But I did turn the page.
Okay.
And it looks like that we did very well, if I'm looking at this right, in language arts.
Yes.
Our numbers are in the 90s and the high 80s.
Participation.
So there are maybe 10 students in that grade, in each grade, except the 3rd grade, that hopefully will get into this class that you set up, that the children didn't sign up for last year. You said there was a limit?
Well, we don't,
I don't know, I thought I heard there was
we
a
do
limit.
try, well, there's a limit on the one that we just applied for the grant on. So
Okay.
last year, what we saw was when we did the program after school, if we let the class get too big, the results actually showed less gains. So
But the
this
kid-
year, we are going to cap it
But
at
the
6
kids
students.
didn't sign up.
They don't sign up, we invite them.
Oh, okay.
But
So
the one
you-
piece that I don't have, and we realized we hadn't done a really great job of looking at, is we do want to look at the attendance.
You're
of the
inviting the
students.
ones who had problems and maybe didn't pass.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Okay, so
60.7.
I think that part of the problem that I see it is, and I'm glad and I'm not going to school anymore, is you keep switching the math. The math programs have changed the last couple of years. Maybe not this year, but
We've had the same math program for 7 years.
we've had the same math
Yeah.
program?
Not in sixth grade, but in K-5, I'm going to say it's been we will be changing it next year.
Okay. I thought it was changed. So there are 30 students in third grade who didn't pass, well, who didn't do as well as the others. And 20-something students, maybe 40 students, because you got 126 kids in the fourth grade. 26% students in the fifth grade, and the sixth grade is in Riverdale, so the superintendent didn't stay long enough for me asking him to help those 36 students that he has now. But as I said, language arts, we've been doing this for a while now. Language arts has shown great strides, and math has, well, moved up until the 70s, which is better than it has been. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you're right. I'm very proud of our language arts growth. For those of you who've been here for a number of years, or were on my first interview ever as the instructional supervisor, I was pretty much told if I got the job, my job was to raise language arts test scores. So while we do have more work to do, including adding a balance and making sure we're hitting all aspects of a language arts curriculum, math really does need to be our focus. And we really need to try to figure out what's not working. We have the same amount of minutes. We have the same teachers. The one piece I keep looking at, and I'm not saying I want to go there. Our math scores go up, our language arts scores go up as soon as we departmentalize. So remember, our fourth and fifth teacher grades have dyads. So they have one teacher teaching language arts and one teacher teaching math, science, social studies. There's less for that teacher to plan. There's less for that teacher to focus on. Is that the reason? There are districts that do dyads all the way down to first grade. That is not what I am recommending at this point in time, but it is a factor I have to look at and say, is that something that's playing in, or is how we're planning because they have less to plan for something that's happening.
Any questions over here?
First of all, thank you for this. This has been very comprehensive and in-depth and a little
Let's hope
confusing.
CUSAC thinks so too.
Thank you. And a little confusing, John, right? But in essence, it's very informative. I guess my question would be, with the WIN program, you said now our math program in sixth grade dropped from 80 some odd, 86 to 54 or something.
I think it's 55, Mrs.
Doesn't
Foley?
matter.
55 minutes a period in sixth grade?
Sixth grade is 52 minutes a period.
52
And
minutes.
in the lower grades, it's at least, first grade is 45, the rest are 60.
So looking at your analysis, which is greatly respected, is this beneficial, or would it be more beneficial to go back to changing that and having the WIN program not existent or very partially?
So what we did a few years ago, which I do believe, I don't have the exact master schedule memorized in my head, that I think is going to help the WIN period. When we started WIN, we called it Focus, and that was about 10 years ago, and there was one. So there are some districts that run one focus period a day. Those districts have to then decide, does the child need language arts help or math help? Because they only have one focus period. So what we've done now is, when Mrs. Hawley says 60 minutes, there's also another 20 minutes of math WIN. So by focusing on it, I think stop thinking of it as an extra period and keep thinking of it as math, but it's the part of math that is not differentiated instruction, is not whole class new instruction. It's the part that's supposed to fill the holes. So Mr. Walsh talks every year about what are we doing to make sure we know what the kid can't do and fill the hole. By making a WIN in language arts and making a win in math, what we're saying to our staff is, yes, you're supposed to teach new, but you're also supposed to know every student's strengths and areas to strengthen and fix it. Okay, so I do think how we're doing this now is actually beneficial. The biggest thing we have to work on, and I can say it publicly because I've said it to our staff, is every teacher wants to keep teaching. So they don't want to stop that lesson, and we have to get to a point. And so we've said to them, we're starting to do walkthroughs deliberately during that time, okay? We don't want to see the lesson continuing necessarily, unless you've got a small group over here because they struggled with the lesson. We want to see what are the structures within your win period that is showing personalized instruction. And that shouldn't be just some kids on a computer game. So as you know, I am as honest as they come. And if there's an area we need to strengthen at Oradell Public, I will never not tell you what it is, and the staff knows that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned under final takeaways on page 32 that you'd be interested in looking at additional screening tools. So I'm curious to see what you come across, and if you could present to the board, I think that would be great. Because I'll look for stuff when I'm down at the workshop, but it would be nice to have a professional presentation on what's in the marketplace and if it's going to cost us anything. But I definitely think this is a good idea. So.
Yeah, especially what we keep talking about is when we keep thinking about the third grade population, we have so much data as you get older and older, but is there something that if we knew in second grade or at the beginning of third grade, especially in the area of mathematics, would we be able to intervene more? Something that's objective, frankly. Like we have ongoing assessment in the classroom all the time, but something that kind of is just clear data.
Mr. Griffin?
I was just going to reiterate what a great job you guys did. I mean, it is definitely a moment for celebration. And I think the other thing that I would just comment on is to take this really good report and still squeeze out really meaningful spaces for ways that we can improve is really impressive. And yes, when I look at these things, I'm always like, well, this isn't good enough, and this isn't good enough, because we want the best. We all do. And I know you guys are working hard on it. I went back to 2014 looking at our data to be like, well, is this normal? Is this not? Or, whatever. Very much those trends, those lines kind of always kind of go up. They start here, especially those third graders. It's a base point for them. It always is, and they tend to improve. And another part of WIN, like something to celebrate, back in 2014, and you mentioned it earlier, but those ELA numbers, the language numbers, the exceeding or meeting or exceeding number for the third graders back then was 53%. Now it's 70.3. So we have good numbers. I think you guys are targeting extremely well, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's doing that.
Mr. Walsh?
Use the math programs that they have at night to help some of those students that didn't do well.
Like family math?
Yeah.
It's a little bit more of an extension, but I will tell you it is something, one of the things we're looking at is we have really scheduled kids. And so part of the reason we did the high focus tutoring grant during the school day and not after school is sometimes it's hard to get kids to stay after school because they have CCD, they're going to temple, they have sports, they have Girl Scouts, they have that. So one of the things we have started to talk about, and some districts are doing this, they are actually doing tutoring via Zoom at night. So it may be something down the road that we look at. We've been thinking the same thing for professional development.
The reason I brought that up is you go to these classes with your mother and father, right?
True.
Okay. That would drive me nuts if I was going to school. I dreaded going home to my mother with a bad mark. I used to lose the envelopes that the marks were in until the teacher kept giving it to me because my parent had to sign it and bring it back. But if you're in the class with your mother and your father, you might find out that your mother and father might need help as opposed to the child. So you might have parent homework instead of student homework.
Well, you'll
Or
remember.
they might do it together.
And you'll remember that one of the district's goals is parent engagement, right? So one of the things we have talked about, and we've begun to talk about with the staff, is what's that going to look like in the classroom? So if you go back to old-time American Education Week, bringing parents in the classroom, just having them sit in the back of the room and feeling like they're obligated to be there, doesn't get us bang for our buck. But if parents come in and actually learn the math games, then that actually helps that to be reinforced at home. So, Mr. Walsh, you're actually pretty aligned to the admin team because we've been thinking about how to incorporate parents more into this process as well.
Thanks, thank you.
Any other questions here? One thing I think you should maybe clarify again, because I'm not sure everyone here got it. We talked about it in curriculum today, which we were all surprised when you said different tests are given through the state. Kids in the same classroom here are taking different tests, and I don't know if people realize that. It came up in curriculum. Maybe I was the only one that didn't realize it, but.
So one of the things we have to look very carefully at, so the state gets a little frustrating because I would love to share evidence tables with you, and it's one of the things like you're not allowed to share it. So I could probably find one that's not ours to share with you. But what an evidence table is, it shows every standard on the bottom, okay? It shows the state's line for each standard, what percentage got each standard correct, and then it shows your school's line. But here's a problem. You have to look at the table part also, because your whole school might not have been given a question. So if there's 120 students, when you look at the evidence table, there might be a student that was not assessed on a specific standard. Because now I'm sure the state has validity and reliability in all their testing, but it's something we have to also pay attention to.
Good. Thank you very much. That was impressive. Anything more to your report? You have anything? That's it? You don't want to go another hour? Because we would love to hear you.
I could, no, I do want to just really reiterate that we have, because I've gotten parent questions, because the media has done such a nice job of advertising about the high impact tutoring grant. There's just this misnomer out there that means that all current fourth graders were disproportionately impacted, and so everyone's getting it. Again, we are the Oradell Public School District. We are not given millions of dollars. We have $38,000 to use between October 11th and August 30th. So that's not as much as I think some people, when they saw the number that the state released, were considering.
Thank you. We'll move to Business Administrator's Report. Mr. Iapelli.
I just wanted to say I closed out the 2022-2023 school year accounting systems. So we've rolled the system forward. 23-24 year was open, but now we've closed 1 year, so now we only have 1 year open. That's what we're working on this past couple of weeks. That's all I have right now.
Okay, moving on to minutes. We have the review of September 6th. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Iapelli. We have approval of August 16th. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of August 16th.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Darian. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta. Mrs. Downey. Mr. Griffin.
Abstain?
Mrs. Norian.
Abstain.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, committee reports, administrative, Mr. Darian.
Yes, I'd like to introduce items A1 through A3.
I'll second it.
Any questions? I have a quick question. Week of Respect, you doing any activities?
Yes, and they will, actually, one of the feedback we got from parents, especially those that sit on the school culture and climate team, is that we weren't advertising and planning things early enough. So that flyer is actually, I think, all ready to go to parents with a week's planning of activities.
So it's a secret? We have to wait for the flyer? That's fine. Okay, call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Darian?
Yes, I'd like to introduce item B1 for facility use.
I'll second it.
Any questions? Mrs. Walker?
I guess maybe this is for Mr. Iapelli from last, I guess it was the last meeting. We had two that you weren't sure of to be determined, the Oradell basketball and the Borough of Oradell. I looked, I didn't see it here. I don't know.
I spoke with Mr. Iapelli today, and we will be putting it probably on the next agenda.
Oh, okay.
It's just not finalized.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Curriculum, Mrs. Negum isn't here. Mrs. Norian, you want to take that?
Sure. I'd like to present item C1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? I have a question. We will have 2 chaperones per side of each cabin.
We will absolutely 100% have 2 chaperones on each side of the cabin.
We sending out our letter about parent conduct, what is allowed and what is not allowed.
That is part of also we haven't had the SHARP meeting yet, and when parents sign up to chaperone, that is also attached to it.
Do they have to sign?
Do they have to sign? Yes, they do. This is an excellent game we're playing.
Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Finance Technology, Mr. Griffin?
Yes, we had a nice, long meeting on 9/15. I believe the minutes may be in the packet. If not, they will be distributed to you soon. I do want to call your attention to items D5 and D4 that have been added to the agenda. D5, there is an anonymous donation of 12 iPads. That is up for consideration. And then the submission of the grant. This is the high-impact tutoring grant that we talked about for $38,000. So with that, I would go ahead and move items D1 through D5.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Mrs. Walker?
On G5, on the submission of grants, is that, Catherine, the same as you were referring to a couple of meetings ago as far as tutoring goes?
This is the grant that Ms. Bozios was talking about. It's a high-impact grant coming from the state.
Right, but is that,
I don't
this-
think,
D4.
no,
that was a different,
different, I think, yeah.
okay.
Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Personnel, Mrs. Walker?
Yes, I'd like to present E1.
I'll second it.
Any questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey. Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I have nothing to report.
Is there a meeting coming up? Are you going to be voting anytime?
Not
Nothing?
that I know about.
Okay.
I'll let you know as soon as they let me know that we have a meeting.
Isn't that usually November?
Yeah,
Policy, Mrs. Norian?
Policy, we had our policy meeting just prior to this meeting. We went over a number of items. There were a number of policies that required just a one-word or one-sentence update. Those are ready to be put on the agenda for next meeting. There's the other, which deals with visitors and volunteers in the school that we're going to take a little longer look at. But we'll keep you posted, and you'll get the minutes probably in the next meeting packet.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mrs. Acosta?
I have nothing to report.
We should probably set a meeting to start that survey. Open to the public. Not seeing any, we'll move to old and new business.
I have some old business. So the Bergen County NJSBA meeting, that's going to be held here in Paramus. They've updated their agenda, so that's available. I don't know if you got the email.
What's the date of the
The
meeting?
3rd, is it? The 2nd or 3rd?
You and I.
It's October 3rd.
3rd, yeah. It's on my calendar, I don't know. And then workshop, I got an email that the agenda is also available. So I went online, I think it was this morning, and picked a bunch of, things that I was interested in attending. And they have a really nice, interesting speaker, some lady who was like 17 years in soccer as a professional soccer player. So she's going to be speaking on I think on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So that should be pretty exciting. So, I mean, there's other guest speakers too, but a professional athlete is very exciting to me. So that's all I have.
Any other old or new business? Do we have to approve them?
Okay. So is there nothing else? Okay.
We have in our packet, a description of a fundraiser coming up for Odyssey. What is a bucket drive?
There are two fundraisers in your packet. One is a bucket drive that's being done by the student government for childhood cancer. It's something we typically do in October. And the other one is something that is brand new, which is, it was under building usage. However, fundraisers don't typically go on the board agenda. It's just to notify the board. So in building usage, you'll have noticed that Odyssey of the Mind is reserving space in the building on October 9th, which is our conference day. They will be running a pretty much 7-hour camp for students in entering grades 2 through 6 who might be interested in seeing what the Odyssey experience is about. So they'll teach them about long-term, they'll teach them about spontaneous, and just also for parents who may need childcare that day, it provides an opportunity for them to have their child go somewhere safe that day.
And the funds are being split, right?
Yes, so we are running that day with Carteret. As many of you know, the coach from Carteret Middle School and High School got her start in Odyssey of the Mind because her child went to Oradell Public School, and she learned about the program, and she brought it to Carteret, and they've kind of become our big brothers and big sisters in the Odyssey world. So when we go to Worlds, they cheer on our kids, and our kids go and cheer on them. So they're high school students, and Ms. O'Hare will come that day also to facilitate the program.
So the program's only open to our students,
Correct.
but Carteret students are coming, and then the funds will be split between their Odyssey program and our Odyssey program. We also split the truck with them, right? Usually
Yes.
in Worlds. Yeah, we have a good partnership with them. So it should be interesting. Hopefully a lot of kids will sign up. Okay, we do need to go into a closed session for legal issues, so if somebody wants to make that motion. Nora, I'm going to start taking a roll on closed sessions. So can you call the question? Call the,
On the roll,
On the roll.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey. Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
yes, we will not, it's for legal issues, we will not be coming and taking any action afterwards.